Hi guys, thanks for visiting my channel. Today we're going to be baking up some delicious raisin bread. So good. Now I do want to start off by saying that this is a large recipe, and I know my empty nesters are going to go, whoa, I don't need that much raisin bread. But I want to say that it freezes beautifully, and even though there are only 2 of us now, I love having this on hand. So or you can give some away as gifts because it's just that good. Anyway, so what I do is I just wrap mine really well and freeze it. What I like to do is slice my loaves up, and then I put about 6 slices in a bread bag and then put those inside of a freezer bag, and I just keep them in my freezer. And then when I am in the mood for raisin bread, just go out and grab my bag of 6 slices, let it defrost, and because we don't eat a lot of bread, so about 6 slices at a time is all that I really like to have available and ready to eat. So that works well for me. You can keep it in the freezer for several months as long as you have it well wrapped, and it's just great to have on hand. Delicious in the morning with your breakfast, toasted up and slathered with butter. Great with peanut butter. I made French toast with it the other day, and it was heavenly. So there are a lot of ways you can use it. You can use it to make a grilled cheese. I know that sounds odd, but it's delicious with like a smoked Gouda. You can even add some ham or some apple slices. It's just really great, and it's really versatile in a lot of different ways to use it. So don't worry about it being a big recipe. It's great to have on hand. And also, if you are a bread pudding lover, it's great to have loaves in your freezer ready to go. Just defrost them. You can cut them up and make a delicious, on the spur of the moment, bread pudding as well. So really versatile and great to have on hand. So I encourage you to give it a try. Even if you are an empty nester and you think you don't need 3 loaves at a time, I guarantee you are going to love it, and you will love having it readily available. So, and the other thing I want to say is today's video is going to kind of be a 2-for-1, if you will. Not only are we going to be baking up delicious raisin bread, in the process, we are going to do some bread pan testing. Now, I've had several people contact me, and especially after I did my cast iron video, asked me about how I felt about cast iron bread pans and do they cook up better than regular bread pans. So today we are going to find out. We're going to test the same recipe, using the same recipe on the same day at the same time. We're going to do a loaf in cast iron. We're going to do a loaf with my Wilton. This is listed as a heavy gauge steel pan. And then I have just an older metal pan. I'm not sure what this is. I don't know if it's aluminum or if it is steel, but we're gonna try 3 different pans and see which one bakes up best. I've already done it, so I know what my preference is, but I will let you decide for yourself how you feel about the cast iron. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to hydrate our raisins. Now I did want to say also that this recipe, I found it on Pinterest, and then I did some tweaking and made some changes of my own. So I'll list where the original recipe came from, give that person credit. But I did do some tweaking and kind of changed it up just a little bit. So we're gonna rehydrate our raisins, which is not called for in the recipe, and you do not have to do this. But to rehydrate your raisins, it's really simple to do, and I highly encourage you to do it because it makes them more moist and more plump, more juicy, just kicks things up a notch, if you will. So I am going to rehydrate mine with a little Captain Morgan. I'm going to use some spiced rum to hydrate mine, and my rum is at room temperature, obviously, so they need about 30 minutes soaking in the rum. Now, if you want to rehydrate them in water, which is totally fine, you can do one of 2 things. You can heat your water and then put hot water on top of your raisins and do it that way. Or like I said, if your water or your juice or whatever liquid you want to use is room temperature, you want to give them about 30 minutes. If your water's hot, you only need about 15. So it really cuts the time in half if you're using a warm liquid. So we're going to set those aside and let those get hydrating. I did want to say that I found these beautiful organic raisins at Costco. You know, I love Costco. So if you are a Costco member, you might want to pick you up some nice organic raisins there. We're gonna set this the raisins aside. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take 1.5 cups of milk, and I'm going to put it on my stove, and I'm going to bring it up almost to a simmer. And once it gets to a simmer, I'm going to pour it back in my measuring cup, and then I'm going to add a stick of butter and let the stick of butter melt into the milk. So we're going to let our raisins rehydrate. I'm going to get my milk ready, and I will bring you back and we'll get our bread going. Okay guys, I brought my milk up to a simmer just like I told you. And we're going to pour it back into the measuring cup. And then we're going to add a stick of butter. Now, like I said, the original, I'm changing things up a little bit from the original recipe. I think she just recommends using softened butter, but I like melting it in with my milk. Plus it helps the milk cool down a little bit, because you don't want to use hot milk or you'll scramble your eggs that are in the recipe. So we're just gonna let that hang out a little bit, let the butter melt, let the milk cool. It doesn't have to be completely room temperature, but you certainly don't want it that hot. And then the other thing that I'm doing is just getting my flour ready, and I just wanted to show you my technique, and this is acceptable for baking. You can either spoon it and level it off, or you can fluff and scoop, which is what I like to do. So I just stick my measuring cup in there, fluff it a little bit, pick it up, and then level it off with my finger. So we need 8 cups of flour. So my raisins are continuing to hydrate. I've got my flour ready. I'm going to get my other ingredients ready. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to proof my yeast. So I'm going to get some hot water going, and I will bring you back and we'll get the yeast proofing. Okay guys, our milk is still continuing to cool. Also at this time you want to get your eggs out, let them come to room temperature. You never want to use cold eggs when you're baking, so just take them out of the refrigerator. I crack them into another bowl and let them come up to room temperature. If you want a quick method of doing that, you can just take your eggs, put them in a bowl, and cover them with warm water until they're no longer cold to the touch. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add 5 teaspoons of yeast. Now her recipe called for 2 packages of yeast, which would be the equivalent of 4.5 teaspoons, because it's 2 1/4 teaspoons per packet. So if you're using packets, you can use that. I went ahead and just, because I keep bulk yeast on hand, I just went up to 5 teaspoons. That's what I used, and it worked really well. So I'm going to use 5 teaspoons. And you want to use warm water, about 110 degrees. If you use water that's too hot, you'll kill your yeast, and you don't want that. The other thing we're going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the sugar that's called for in the recipe, and I'm going to sprinkle that in with my yeast. If you give your yeast something to feed off of, a little bit of sugar, it'll proof a little bit faster for you. So we're going to let the yeast hang out for about 10 minutes. Our milk's going to continue to cool off, and I'm going to make sure I have all my other ingredients ready, and when I bring you back, we're going to bring it all together. Okay guys, we're back. We are ready to rock and roll. I brought you in close so you can see what's going on in my bowl. I'm just using my dough hook. I'll lock it down, and you can see my yeast is all nice and foamy, and it's ready to go. So we're going to go ahead. I've got my mixer on low. Go ahead and add our yeast. I'm going to add what's left of my 1/2 cup of sugar. We used a little bit in our yeast to get it to proof. You need, her recipe called for 1 teaspoon of salt. I thought it wasn't quite enough, so I'm bumping mine up to 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And then we need 3 eggs. And then our milk with our butter melted in it. Slowly drizzle that in. I'm going to let that get mixed in, and then we're going to add our raisins. Okay, that's mixed up pretty good. it's shaggy, which is what we want. And I'm going to add our rehydrated raisins, and I'm telling you, those raisins soaked in rum are absolutely delicious. So let's go ahead and mix it again. I've got it on the 2 setting on my artisan stand mixer, and we want it to come together in a nice ball, and then we're going to knead it. You may have to add more flour depending on how humid your weather is. You may need more flour. The last time I made it, I did need more flour. And we'll just add a little bit at a time. We're looking for a smooth, elastic dough. And as you can see, it's pretty wet. So I'm going to start adding some flour. Until it starts to come together. And I'm adding a couple of tablespoons at a time. You get it to the point that it's come together in a ball, and you can kind of see that it has. And yes, this is a large recipe, so it's made a mess of my mixer, but it's fine. So we're going to turn it back on, and I'm going to knead it on low for about 5 minutes. Now you can do the kneading part by hand, or you can use your mixer. It's entirely up to you, but I'm going to let mine go for about 5 minutes. Okay guys, I'm done kneading my dough. My bowl's not gonna come. There we go. You want your dough, we've talked about this before, you want your dough to be smooth and elastic, a little bit sticky. See how it's a little bit sticky? But it feels like a warmed up rubber band. And that's what we want. So I'm gonna put my dough into my greased bowl. Forgive the background noise, my husband is trimming shrubs. But it feels nice and smooth, and it feels like a warmed up rubber band. That's what we want. So I sprayed my bowl with nonstick cooking spray, and we're going to put it in our bowl, and we're going to let it hang out for about an hour until it doubles in size. So you know my trick, I like to cover it with plastic wrap and a clean kitchen towel, and then I stick it in my oven. You can either turn your light on, or you can warm up your oven for just a few seconds and then turn it off. You just want a nice draft-free place for your dough to rise. So that's what we're going to do for about an hour, and then I'll bring you back and we will fill it and shape it into loaves. Okay guys, just a couple of things I wanted to talk about while our dough is proofing. I did end up adding about an additional cup of flour, and it's hard to tell you when you're baking bread, it's not always an exact science because it depends so much on the environment in your kitchen and what's going on outside. So if it's a really humid day, you're going to need more flour. And if you know that, you can decrease the amount of water that you're proofing your yeast in if you want to try that. Or you're just going to have to add more flour until the dough starts to clean the sides of your bowl. And I wanted to say also that since this is a big recipe, it's really a lot for my mixer to handle. So if you want to knead it by hand, by all means go ahead. Yeah, my motor's really hot. You don't want to burn out your mixer kneading it. I do try to use my mixer when I can, and especially today I was making pickles and my mandolin bit my pinky, and I didn't want my dough to taste like a Band-Aid. So I was trying to let my mixer do all the work, which it did the first time I made this recipe. So, but yeah, it's pretty hot today. So on larger loaves or larger batches of bread, you may want to knead it by hand for that reason, so you don't burn out your mixer. Okay guys, hopefully this gives you a good view of what goes on next. Look at that beautiful dough. It has risen beautifully. A word about proofing: make sure you don't overproof or your loaves will not stay nice and puffy when you bake them. So we want to punch our dough down. It smells so good. And we're going to lightly flour our surface, just a tiny bit of flour. And I'm going to turn our dough out onto our floured surface. And then we're going to pat this out into a rectangle that's about 1/2 inch thick. You can roll it with a rolling pin if you prefer, but hands work pretty well here. What I'm going to do now is we're going to take an egg wash. Now in the original recipe she said to use milk, and then I did some research and King Arthur recommends doing the egg wash because when you roll up your bread, after you cool it, when you go to slice it, it can kind of come apart. So the egg acts like a binder and will help prevent that from happening. So like I said, I made a few changes from the original recipe, and this was another change that I made. So you just want to brush that all over your dough. And then we're going to sprinkle on a cinnamon sugar filling. Now her recipe, the original recipe, called for a cup of sugar and 3 tablespoons of cinnamon. I found that to be way too much for me. So I have 1/2 cup of white sugar and 1.5 tablespoons of cinnamon. And you can kind of use your own discretion on that. I just felt like that was so much sugar, it was really hard to roll it up and keep it from falling out. So this seemed to be better. Plus it just seemed like a lot of sugar. Just spread it out, and now we're going to start rolling, and you want to roll it kind of tight. Just get it going and then just give it a good roll. And you want to keep in mind when you're patting out your rectangle that you're going to be cutting it into thirds. Since we have 3 pans, this makes 3 loaves. And then what you want to do is you want to pinch this bottom seam together. Now her recipe, she said to pinch your ends and tuck them under. I didn't see that in any other recipe when I was looking for raisin bread recipes, and I honestly don't think that it's necessary. So I'm just gonna flip it back over. And then I'm gonna get a nice sharp knife. And if you want your loaves exact, you can obviously measure. I'm just going to eyeball it and just use a nice sharp knife and cut it. Now, our pans. This is just the regular metal pan. And put him in there. And then this is the Wilton heavy gauge steel pan. Put him in there. And then my trusty old cast iron. Him in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take one of these wonderful towels. My sister brought these to me. She said she bought them from Sam and they work really, really well for covering bread while they're proofing or after they've baked and you want to cool them. They're nice and thin, and they feel like a really thin linen. So I'm gonna cover them. I'm gonna put them back in the oven to proof a second time. I'm gonna cover them with my nice clean towel, and we're gonna let them proof for another 45 minutes to an hour. You're looking for your dough to crust about 1 inch above the pan. So when we get ready to bake, I will bring you back. Okay guys, once my bread reaches the top of my pan, and these you can have a little sneak peek there, I take them out of my oven, and then so that I can preheat my oven to 350. So that's where we are. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn my oven on to 350 to preheat, and by the time that it is heated up, we should be ready to stick them in the oven and get them baking so you can see how delicious this is. Okay guys, my loaves have been raising for about an hour. So I think we're pretty good to go into the oven. Look at those beautiful loaves of bread, so good. So we're gonna go ahead and put them in the oven, preheated 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes. Her original recipe said 45, mine did not take that long. So I'm gonna say about 30. You want a nice, beautiful golden brown color on top, and they should sound hollow when you tap them. So in the oven they go. Okay guys, our baking time is up, and just like the last time I made this recipe, mine took 30 minutes. Her recipe does say that to bake them for 45. 45 is too long for me. I don't know, I don't have a thermometer in my oven, but it pretty much bakes everything the way it's supposed to. So I'm not sure why my time is off a little bit from hers, but it took me 30 minutes to get nice golden loaves, and when you tap them on top, they sound hollow. Now I do want to say that when we put them in the pans, I did mention that her recipe said to pinch the ends and tuck them under, which I did that last time, and then some other recipes that I consulted didn't recommend doing that. So this time I tried it without pinching the ends together and tucking them. I think I would do that from now on. It doesn't look bad, but you can tell that it's like it's swirled in the middle on the ends. The top of my bread kind of shrunk up, and then you could see the other layers. So I think I would pinch the ends at least together, if not pinch them together and tuck them under. So, but that's up to you. It's just aesthetics. It's not going to change the way that it tastes, but I wanted to show you how beautiful these are. And in my opinion, this time and last time, I think that the cast iron cooks superbly. The others look totally fine, but I think that the cast iron, it just makes a beautiful loaf of bread. But that's just my opinion. So what we're gonna do now is I'm going to grab a knife. I'm gonna do my favorite trick of all time with any type of bread. When it comes out of the oven, I always put some butter on top. So that's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna melt some butter over the top. Now her recipe, she said to melt the butter and then brush it on top, which is totally fine to do that. Monty, no. It's up to you. But this works just as well. Just as an FYI on bread baking, if you have a wrinkle or any kind of imperfection when you put your loaf in the oven, it will still be there when you take it out. So I just want to show you. You can see there was a wrinkle. In this one, it's still there. So if you want perfectly round loaves, you need to make sure that they're nice and perfectly round before you put them in. It doesn't really bother me. It all tastes the same. So I'm good with it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to let them cool for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to take them out of their pans and let them finish cooling completely. And then you have options. When I was a kid, my mom always bought raisin bread that had icing on top. So you could totally ice a loaf if you'd like. I will include my recipe for icing the raisin bread here. It will ice one loaf. So if you wanted to ice all three of them, you'll have to triple the recipe. But I only take care of one loaf at a time. So I just made my recipe to accommodate one loaf. The original recipe that the bread came from, she doesn't recommend icing it at all. So you can leave it plain. Like I said, it makes delicious toast and sandwiches, which you would not want the icing if you're going to use it for toast and sandwiches. But for just eating for breakfast in the mornings or as a snack, the icing just puts it over the top delicious. Okay guys, our bread's not completely cool, but it's cool enough that I can slice it for you. So I just wanted to give you a little peek of the inside, and you can see this is another end that did not seal, but it's fine. I don't mind. Ooh, see how beautiful on the inside. Has great texture. Just love it. Oops. Bring it in close so you can see. And put a little bit of butter on it. That's the way I like it. I love it in the morning toasted with my coffee. See all that beautiful cinnamon filling. I think that that's plenty, but like I said, if you want the whole cup, go for it. Really good. And I love the rum soaked raisins. You can leave that out. You don't have to soak your raisins at all if you choose not to, but if you want to elevate the flavor, soaking them in rum is the way to go. And I'm pretty sure that all the alcohol cooks out when you're baking it. So I don't think that's an issue. It just has a nice flavor in the background. So I highly encourage you to give this a try. And like I said, if you don't have a big family to feed, it's okay because it freezes beautifully and it tastes so good, and there's so many uses for it. I hope you give this a try. Thanks for spending time with me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed my video, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you're not a subscriber so you don't miss out on any of the fun we're having here, and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching.